Okay, so today we're going to talk about the parts of a circle. So when we are discussing the parts of a circle, there's really two things that you need to be aware of. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is the radius. So the radius is this piece right here that you see. It is 7 inches. It goes from the center of the circle all the way to the edge of the circle. So it has to pass or go through the center of the circle. So something like this would not be a radius. That would be a chord, and that's not what we need. So the radius goes from the center of the circle to the outer edge of the circle, and the radius is half the diameter. So we'll talk about the diameter here in just a second, but the radius is basically halfway across your whole circle. So if we go back and we look at the diameter is the distance all the way across the circle through the midpoint. So if you see this here, this is our midpoint. The diameter, again, has to go through the midpoint. So if we, had a line that looked like this, that would not be a diameter because it does not pass through the midpoint. That would just be another chord. So this diameter on this one happens to be 18. These are two different circles here that we're talking about, but this diameter is 18. So the relationship between the diameter and the radius is half of the diameter, which means the diameter is twice the radius. Twice is just a way to say times 2. So those are the relationships that you're going to see when we're talking about parts of a circle. So here's a little kind of helpful hint that I tell my students to use when we're working with radius and diameter. This over here, you'll see the R for radius, and then for diameter, you see that right there. And so what we're going to do is the radius times 2 will give you the measure of the diameter. So if you're going from radius to diameter, that's your relationship. If you're going from diameter back to radius, so if we have the diameter and we need to get back to the radius, we're going to do the inverse operation, which is to divide by 2. So that's kind of a really helpful hint. I tell them to write that on their assignments and things like that so that they can remember the relationship between radius and diameter. So let's do that. Let's write our helpful hint. So radius times 2 is diameter. Diameter divided by 2 is going to be radius. So in this case, we have 7. And this is the radius. So we want to find the diameter. So if 7 is the radius, we want to find what the diameter of this circle would be. And you can kind of see, like, this little section is a radius and this section is a radius. So if this one's 7 and this one's 7, then our diameter would be equal to 14 inches, which is exactly what we just did. So if we had the radius that was 7, we multiplied it times 2, we would get 14 for our diameter. All right, let's do the same thing on this one. Same situation. We have radius and diameter. We have, in this case, we start with the diameter. We know to go from radius to diameter, we times 2. So that means the inverse is true to go backwards. So to get from the diameter back to the radius, we want to divide by 2. So that means if this whole thing all the way across is 18, if we divide 18 by 2, halfway across is just going to be 9 inches, which is exactly what we would have done. We would have taken 18, we would have divided by 2 to get the radius of 9 inches. So just remember, if you're looking at your really important relationships, this is really what it goes back to. The radius is half of the diameter. The diameter is twice the radius, which then tells us over here, this is what we can do over here to just find those relationships really easily.